After years of fans begging, Tomb Raider 1 through 3 will finally make its way to Nintendo Switch and other current-gen consoles. So what are my early impressions? Considering they're imitating a retro game and not remaking it, I think they did a good job. I don't like how the animals all look like balloon animals, but Lara does not look bad. Her melons did not shrink either. The purpose of remastering a game is to preserve everything about the game, but enhancing the visuals. So everything you dislike has to stay, but this also includes everything that you do like, such as keeping Lara's proportions. People severely overthink the possibilities of what updating things for modern audiences could do when Lara Croft is the whole reason this franchise still exists today. That's why her name's in this title of this pack of games. Especially when one of the features you can have is switching back and forth between new and PS1 style visuals, making Lara's bag smaller wouldn't make sense. Crystal Dynamics and Aspyr were smart enough to know that changing things for no good reason is not good for their bottom line. I'm kinda stunned that this is an M-rated game, considering the older games this was based on was rated T. So I wonder what has been added to this game that warrants a stricter rating. Let me just get this out of the way before I continue. Melanie Mack was wrong. She wastes time making videos where she doesn't know what she's talking about. They age like milk. She goes on numerous podcasts where she regurgitates the same lies, or statements that can easily be disputed. That classic Tomb Raider was never going to return. That was full of shit. How Tomb Raider is for modern audiences. Made that up in her own head. And where does she go from here? She abandoned her gaming career for being a political activist, so she would be a hypocrite to be excited about this after all this time she's lectured us to boycott Tomb Raider and Crystal Dynamics. She is in a no-win situation, and she only has herself to blame. There was absolutely no reason for her to turn on her favorite series the way she did. Now, this is not the first remastered collection that Tomb Raider has announced this year. Earlier in the year, the Lara Croft collection came out, 5 years after the game's director entertained the idea of releasing both Lara Croft games on the Switch. I myself have documented that it had been many years since those comments were made and still no announcements until after Square Enix sold the IP and the studios away. And Square Enix were incredibly pleased with the Switch. At this point, they have more games on the Switch than any other third-party developer does. Why wouldn't they want to try remastering the old Tomb Raider games, or any of the other old IDOS or core design games? Like Gex. Another revival of an old collection of games. It does not make sense why Square Enix never did this. Considering that Tomb Raider had outpaced one of their flag-bearing franchises, Dragon Quest, and shortly after, they no longer wanted anything to do with Tomb Raider, I have come to the conclusion that they never wanted Tomb Raider to do well. They only wanted to own it so they can diversify their portfolio and be considered a global games juggernaut. They call Tomb Raider selling only 4 million copies a failure, while they also called Final Fantasy XVI selling less than 4 million copies a success. We know that each Tomb Raider game at least had a $100 million budget. But what about Final Fantasy XVI? What about 15? What about Kingdom Hearts 3? What about Final Fantasy VII Remake? Because it's no secret that all those games took more time to make, and involved many more people that Crystal Dynamics and IDOS have on them. They don't want to paint their own franchises in a negative light and owe all their success to a non-Japanese entity. Because it made no sense to want to do away with Tomb Raider if it can churn out 3 games and sell nearly 40 million copies in 9 years' time, while your Final Fantasies and Kingdom Hearts need multiple console generations to make, and they don't even do as well as Tomb Raider. It's like a Japanese soccer club that constantly benches David Beckham for playing too well. And suddenly, now we're getting old Tomb Raider games on Switch, now we're getting Gex, now there are talks of Soul Reaver remasters and whatnot. These things could have happened much earlier, and I'm sure these games were in the can for a long time until a situation came along where they were permitted to market and release them. And I'm pretty sure the Switch can also run the reboot Tomb Raider games too. I also have to think that Square Enix stopped them from porting those games to Switch because that's where they want to put all their JRPGs, and they don't want to look like idiots any more than they already do for selling the Tomb Raider brand and studios away later. So do I blame Crystal Dynamics for taking their grand old time getting older games remastered? No. Clearly they wanted to port them sooner, but Square held them back. I would never expect a company like Square to waste a lot of people's time and money. Square Enix is losing money themselves, but since they don't want to stop doing what they're doing, they treat one of their most successful properties like a used sofa so they can make Kingdom Hearts 4 and other excessively huge Final Fantasy sequels.